This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 329, entitled "Women Oppress Men Far More Than Men Oppress Women." Description. This flyer shows how women oppress men far more than vice versa. Men are manslaved by women and face a 1 chance in 4 of being financially massacred and have their lives ruined in the hated fluffy feminist hypocrite dominated divorce court system. Men are socialized to be manslaves, are cuckoo mothered, nagged to death, have no paternity, rejection right, etc. Women achieved most of their legal rights in the 70s and 80s. Men have yet to go through a similar process, so that there is a greater need now for a masculist movement than a feminist movement. Women have already won most of their gender victories. Men's war hasn't really started yet. The flyer itself. Women oppress men far more than men oppress women, by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer claims that women oppress men far more than men oppress women. Hence there is a much stronger need for a masculist movement than for a feminist movement. This flyer does not deny that men oppress women. You only have to read the feminist literature from both modern times and from decades ago, even centuries ago, to see that. What is not conscious in most women is that women oppress men far more, that men are so deeply brainwashed into their traditional role of being a manslave to a fluffy parasite female that men are not even conscious that they're being sexploited, and for many decades of their lives. In the 70s, when the second wave of the feminist movement really got off the ground, with the formation of powerful women's organizations, for example, NOW, N-O-W, National Organization for Women, it's in the US, women achieved nearly all the major legal rights they were fighting for. For example, equal pay for equal work, equal rights to enter the professions, an abortion right, aka MARA, M-A-R-E-R, maternity rejection right, no-fault divorce, etc. The current feminist movement is complaining now mostly about how men treat women in the workplace that women have now swarmed into in their billions. Men gave women the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, long life expectancies due to modern male-invented medicine, access to higher education, so that women had only 0, 1 or 2 kids in most cases, and hence had time in their hands once their kids were off to kindergarten or primary school. Thus, essentially, the feminist problem was solved in the 70s and 80s, so that what the feminists are now trying to do, that is take power, forcing men to give up some of theirs, is really only a mop-up operation on the part of feminists. Feminists have essentially won their fight compared to where women were a century or more ago. Men, on the other hand, are today where women were in the 50s, that is, in dire need of a masculist movement to raise men's consciousness that men are far more oppressed by women than women are by men today. Men's gender role has not changed much in centuries. That is, men are still deeply conditioned by culture, by mothers, by girlfriends, to be manslaves to women, to work for them, to pay for them, to sacrifice themselves for women. But women have fucked things up, and badly, shooting themselves in the foot by taking over the divorce courts and making divorce so toxic for men that now in many Western countries 2/3 of young men under 35 refuse to marry, reject paternity, the huge issue, and spend their money on themselves. Young women are now really starting to panic because they're noticing that quality young men are refusing to give them their sperm, so that these young women are waking up to the idea that they're not going to have babies, at least not from quality men, which goes against their female hypogamous natures, that is, the female instinct to mate up with a superior male whose superior DNA will be inherited by her kids, which is good for the species and hence was selected for in Darwinian evolutionary terms. The fluffy feminists, in all their hypocrisy and political short-sightedness, have made the divorce courts toxic for males, making marriage toxic for males, so that the message is really getting out to young men that marrying and being a father is a really stupid thing to do, because it is seen as playing Russian roulette with their young male lives, except that instead of there being 6 chambers in the barrel, there are only 4. That is, a divorcing father has a 1 chance in 4 of being financially massacred and have his life ruined in a fluffy feminist hypocrite-dominated divorce court system. He will lose his kids with a near certainty, 90%. He will lose his house. That will go to his fluffy ex-wife so that she can raise her kids in it. He will lose half his possessions to her, even if she was far less economically competent than she was. He will be forced to pay child payments to kids he will barely see, maybe 2 afternoons a month. And often, if his ex-wife is real fluffy, he may have to pay her alimony for the rest of her life, so that she can remain a fluffy parasite of his money after the divorce, the way she was before the divorce. In other words, he has been financially crucified and had his life ruined. This happens to 1 married father in 4, because half of marriage end in divorce, and about half of those divorces, the ex-wife turns into an amoral, vindictive, deeply misandrist, feminazi bitch, out to crucify her ex-husband. And thanks to the fact that these hated fluffy feminist hypocrites have taken over the divorce courts, she is able to. Today's divorce courts are crime scenes against men that destroy the lives of millions of men on a daily basis, and is the source of a sex war that men will wage against women if it is not stopped. Men traditionally have been raised by parents, especially mothers, to be manslaves to women, to pay for women to stay at home raising her kids and have him pay for her and the kids. Prior to the fluffy feminist takeover of the divorce courts in the 70s and 80s, at least the man got to keep his kids, so he was much more prepared to be a manslave to a femalian than today. Young men today argue that given he faces a 1 in 4 chance of losing his kids, then why have them in the first place? Men would refuse to jump out of a plane with a parachute that has a 1 in 4 chance of not opening. Young men today advise each other, quotes, "Hey guy, don't be a fool, don't marry, don't have kids. If you're stupid enough and ignorant enough to do that, then you're playing Russian roulette with your life. The feminazi bitches have taken over the divorce courts and they will crucify you. They are amoral, solipsistic, feminazi bitches who are misandrous sadists who will destroy your life, utterly oppressing you and for decades." End quote. 3/4 of young women at age 16 in high schools choose to become what the Masculists call fluffy crappers. That is, they choose to study fluffy crap. That is, the intellectually easy, intellectually lazy, soft option of memory-based majors, for example, English literature, history, languages, etc., instead of the hard option of math and the sciences, where they'll have to think and make logical deductions. These fluffy crappers will then be forced to study more fluffy crap majors at college because they're excluded from studying STEM, S-T-E-M, science, tech, engineering and math, and the professions at college due to a lack of the hard option prerequisites at high school. These fluffy crappers then end up with a fluffy crap diploma that is worthless in the modern high-tech economy, so are unable to afford to buy their own middle-class house. They have become career incompetent. Under feminist influence, these fluffy crapper women then fuck around in their 20s, having some 40 different penises in them, statistics show, by the time they are in their 30s, who then start listening to their biological clocks ticking hard, so start looking around for some gullible, ignorant manslave to parasite upon, so that he pays for her to sit on her fat, parasitic ass and raise her kids. A decade later, she will be bored with her 41st penis, her manslave husband, and will divorce him, taking his kids, his house, his money, half his stuff, and leave him massacred with his life ruined. Many of these sadistic, amoral, solipsistic bitches even hold divorce parties to celebrate their fleecing of men's finances and their very lives. This is female oppression on a massive scale, showing clearly what women really think of men, that is, as cash machines, to be sexploited by women, to bribe men with sex, to pay for women to be fluffy parasites, not fipping up, that is, becoming FIPs equals financially independent persons, by not bothering to get a career competent education at high school and college. Fluffies are the enemy of the masculists. We aim to wipe them out by totally ignoring them, not even pumping and dumping them, forcing them to rot on the shelf so that their fluffy bitch genes are removed from the gene pool. Fluffies are immoral, parasitic, manslaving vermin to the masculists, and vermin are to be exterminated, which is what the masculists do to the hated fluffy parasites, and even more so to the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, who are even worse. It's bad enough that they are fluffies, but far worse, they are also hypocrites because of what they're doing in the divorce courts, massively oppressing men over decades, destroying men's lives. These fluffy feminist hypocrites want equal rights for women in the parliaments, but want to keep their fluffy privileges in the divorce courts, forcing men to pay for them instead of women becoming FIPs and pulling their own financial weight. They want equal rights for women, but reject equal obligations with men in not... They want equal rights with men, but reject equal obligations with men in not bothering to share with men the burden of getting a career competent education, to become responsible FIPs as adults. They want their cake and to eat it too. They are profound hypocrites and are thus hated by the masculists. Men have no paternity rejection right, the way women have the maternity rejection right. So women have the legal right to reject an unwanted pregnancy, but men don't. The most blatant form of sexual discrimination that exists, and it's not against women, but against men. Millions of men have their lives ruined by women lying to them about taking the pill, who then get pregnant against the wishes of their men. These women then slam paternity suits on these unwilling fathers, forcing them to pay, instead of these women taking full financial responsibility for the costs of the kid if they continue with a pregnancy. This is another example of the sustained over decades type of oppression that women commit against men. Another such example are the cuckoo mothers who lie to their husbands that the baby growing inside them is his, whereas in fact it's from another man, so he is duped to pay for another man's kid. There are many other examples of sustained decades-long oppression of men by women. For example, women can nag men to death, literally, causing men such stress that their hearts finally give out. Many men don't dare divorce their bitches of wives, arguing that it is cheaper to keep her, but pay a horrible price of being nag-stressed for decades, making his life miserable. The above are some of the many examples of how women oppress men and over decades of men's lives, not some fleeting event at the workplace that a woman is subject to. That a woman is subject to a man's condescending attitude towards women, which, by the way, is largely justified on the part of men, given women's genetic inferiority, women's 10% smaller brains, women's 4 IQ point lower average IQ compared to men, women's lack of genius, women's pathetic 1% of science Nobel Prizes, women's negligible contribution to the creation of cultures, inventing almost nothing, building almost nothing, creating almost nothing. Men have good reason to be condescending of women. Close brackets. Thus, the constant harping of the feminazis against the patriarchy, that is, the general male dominance over everything, in brackets, which, by the way, is a simple consequence of women's hypergamy, wanting to mate with superior males, so tens of thousands of generations of women sexually selecting men who were taller, bigger, stronger, fiercer and smarter resulted in men who were taller, bigger, stronger, fiercer, smarter than women, and hence dominated cultures. Women only have themselves to blame for the patriarchy that women themselves indirectly created. Close brackets. Is a relatively trivial kind of oppression against women compared to the massive decades-long oppression of women against men. Men desperately need a masculist movement to lash out at those women who have parasitic, fluffy attitudes, seeing men as, quote,
existing on this earth to pay for women to have babies.
Masculists put enormous moral pressure on fluffies to fip up or be punished by men by fluffies being forced by men to be manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and increasingly spat at by a culture that is becoming daily more sympathetic to men's horrible gender plight at the hands of feminazi vermin, fluffy parasites, fluffy feminist hypocrites, etc. Women oppress men far more than men oppress women. So there needs to be a strong masculist movement to persuade men not to be man-slaves and to push women to fip up. We men have the power to force women to fip up because nearly all men are fips. We are socialized to be fips and even evolved to be fips. Thus we men can force women, fluffies, to fip up. Because a fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some manslave, if some stupid gullible man is prepared to become a manslave to her. But thanks to the MGTOW and Masculist movements, the supply of such gullible manslaves is drying up, as more young men get to hear the Masculist message of the need to fight for men's rights, reforming the divorce courts, making them men fair, bringing in the para, etc., men fairing many legal discriminations against men across the board. Women need to become female masculists, voting with men to men fair the gender laws. Otherwise, men will continue to boycott marriage and reject paternity. So women will be babyless and whole populations will be wiped out. The root cause of this population annihilation is the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, making them indirect genociders, which eventually will get them killed by masculine soldiers if and when a sex war comes, when men won't tolerate that these feminazi bitches indirectly wipe out whole populations. If women want men to be fathers again, then the current male role needs to be reformed. The gender laws need to be men-faired. Women need to fip up and stop being fluffy parasites, oppressing men for decades of their lives as gullible man-slaves. Probably within a decade, the percentage of men rejecting marriage and paternity will be over 90%, which is a catastrophe. This has to change. Women need to fip up. The gender laws need to be men-faired. Women must stop oppressing men as badly as they do. Men need to become masculists. Women need to become female masculists, to vote with men to men fair the gender laws. Once that happens, the two sexes will get along a lot better. Women will have babies again, and men will get to keep their kids, not losing them with a 1 chance in 4 in the current fluffy feminist hypocrite-dominated divorce court system. Men will respect women more because women will have fipped up, pulling their financial weight and not expect to be able to parasite off some gullible, stupid manslave. Women will finally have grown up, behaving as financially and morally responsible adults. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets, contains links to 300 plus YouTube, Minds, BitChute, Masculist essays/videos, and to the book, Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.